and welcome to Dispel Magic, the podcast where we overthink how the magic of D&D might shape your campaign setting in surprising and unexpected ways. I'm Benjamin, game designer and writer.
And my name's Dane. I'm a dungeon master, podcaster, and voice actor. Oh man, I wish I remembered what we're doing for this episode, Benjamin. You told me and I just can't remember. I wish so hard. I wish I might on the star tonight.
You're so close.
To what? A yuck?
Yep. There it is. Today's episode is a patron's pleasure pick.
Oh.
From our patrons' pleasure poll.
Oh, okay. I got it.
We gave our Patreon patrons option of 3 different episode topics, and they chose Wish.
What were the options?
I don't remember.
You don't
anymore.
remember? Okay.
No. I do, however, remember, like, I thought long and hard before I put Wish on the list of options, because obviously this is kind of, in some ways, this should be probably the last spell we ever cover.
It's almost the end all be all.
Right. But when I was looking at it a bit more, I realized that it basically just replicates every other spell, so we'll get into that later, but it actually doesn't matter what order we do it in, because essentially just every episode you've listened to so far and every episode you ever will listen to, just add a also Wish can do this.
It can be wished.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm familiar with, I guess, the second part of this spell more than that first kind of nitty-gritty part, which I'll go into in a second, but the world-bending, world-breaking aspect of Wish is kind of what you think about. Yeah. It comes in the Book of Many Things, right? Or, excuse me, it comes in the Deck of Many Things. You can pull a wish, and then from genies or jinn, right? Mm-hmm. You can get wishes from them, but you got to be 17th level. You said to cast this spell.
It's a 9th level spell, so you're going to be a 19th level or a 17th level pure spellcaster. It's a long road to Wish.
It's a long road to Wish, as they say. So here are the spell specifics. Wish is a 9th level conjuration spell available to sorcerers and wizards. It takes 1 action to cast, has a range of self, and has a duration of instantaneous. The spell text says, "Wish is the mightiest spell a mortal creature can cast. By simply speaking aloud, you can alter the very foundations of reality in accord with your desires. The basic use of this spell is to duplicate any other spell of 8th level or lower. You don't need to meet any requirements of that spell, including costly components. The spell simply takes effect. Alternatively, you can create one of the following effects of your choice." Now, there's a couple of different things that this spell allows. I'm going to just run down some of them, and I'm going to summarize others. But the number 1 is you can create an object of up to 25,000 gold pieces in value that isn't a magic item. The object can be no more than 300 feet in any dimension, and it appears in an unoccupied space you can see on the ground. You can also heal your party, cast greater restoration on them. You can give them resistance to a damage type you choose. You can give them immunity to a single spell or other magical effect for 8 hours. And then you can undo a single recent event by forcing a reroll. So that's all kind of mechanical things. You might be able to achieve something beyond the scope of the above examples. State your wish to the GM as precisely as possible. The GM has great latitude in ruling what occurs in such an instance. The greater their wish, the greater the likelihood that something goes wrong. This spell might simply fail. The effect you desire might only be achieved. The effect you desire may only partially be achieved, or you may suffer some unforeseen consequences as a result of how you worded your wish. For example, wishing that your villain was dead might propel you further in time to a period that villain was no longer alive. So it's monkey paw rules. They're doing the monkey paw. The stress of casting this spell to produce any effect other than duplicating another spell weakens you. After enduring that stress, each time you cast a spell until you finish a long rest, you take 1d10 necrotic damage per level of that spell. This damage can't be reduced or prevented in any way. In addition, your strength drops to 3, if it isn't 3 or lower already, for 2d4 days. For each of those days that you spend resting and doing nothing more than light activity, your remaining recovery time decreases by 2 days. Finally, there's a 33% chance that you are unable to cast Wish ever again if you suffer this stress. Whew!
Thank you for that
rundown.
That was probably the longest one you'll ever have to do.
Probably. Got it over with.
Yeah.
The second part of this spell is what I think of when I think of Wish, but you have some expected uses.
I mean, I think the primary expected use really is that last one where you get to wish for whatever.
Anything.
That's why people are excited about Wish and go for Wish. I actually have a really bad habit of dropping Rings of 3 Wishes into games, like even at pretty low levels, just because I love to have a silver bullet there for people to worry about. Is this worth using right now? Should we hold on to it in case we need it in the future?
I gave a monkey paw to my first ever game with a bunch of first-time players with one finger left, one wish left on that monkey paw, and they buried it in the forest. And they do not remember it.
I think in the last game, I gave out a Ring of 3 Wishes. That's exactly what they did too. They just like hid it somewhere on, like they kept it on their person, but they all agreed they were never going to use it under any circumstances, and it never got used.
Right.
They were just done using it.
Yeah.
Actually,
prudent adventurers.
I think it might have been the epilogue to the game where they used it. I think as the campaign ended, they were like, "Here's 3 things we're gonna wrap up, and we're just gonna wish it and
just
be
real
over.
quick. We're done."
Yeah.
So let that happen exactly how we want.
Yeah. I think it was essentially they just were sealing off the bad guy kind of permanently. They were making the solution they found permanent.
I see this working for folks like you who are really good at, I don't know, interpreting information and, using that information in effective ways. Because for me, the monkey paw aspect would be really tough for me to come up with on the fly.
Yeah, I can't say. I mean, I actually really kind of dislike that component to this spell. Like the whole thing about, I wish the villain were dead, so I get projected forward in time is like, that's dumb.
Yeah,
like,
that makes your players hate you.
Yeah,
they don't want to play anymore.
It makes sense if there's a genie there who, for some reason, takes like, I don't know, some kind of pleasure in making people miserable, and so is distorting their wishes that way. But to have a spell that just at its core function intentionally misinterprets you to not give you the thing you're saying that you wanted, even though the spell's purpose is to give you the thing you wanted, I don't like.
Sounds pretty toxic.
Yeah,
it's a toxic relationship.
It is a toxic
Wish.
relationship. So I generally speaking, I would. I also though, so I wouldn't do that. Or generally speaking, I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
Unless it was like very poorly worded. But that gets to my next point, which is that because this text exists the way it does, people are incredibly precise when they make a wish.
Right. They know what's coming.
So if there's this example of getting thrown forward in time where the villain's dead, it's, I want this villain to die at this particular moment in time under these circumstances. Like they're just gonna spell it all out.
All of our party members are going to remain alive and standing here and watching it happen. Yeah. And we all have ponies.
Right. Like there's just, and then you get to this other thing, which is like,
Addendums.
How much can you wish? Like, is it like,
how many commas can you put into your wish? Run-on sentences be damned.
Right. So I don't know.
It's rule of cool. It's
that I think is maybe the bigger reason that I don't like the monkey paw component of it, is because it just then pushes players to come up with like essentially contractual language when they're casting the spell, in which case it avoids the monkey paw thing, but it just adds a whole lot of extra effort, and the whole game stops so that for 30 minutes the players can brainstorm exactly how to phrase this so they don't get screwed.
And I could see that being a fun aspect for some folks who really like getting into those nitty-gritty details and trying to think ahead of the DM, specifically players who like to outsmart DMs.
Yeah.
Because then they have a certain gratification for like, haha, nope, I saw what you're going to do, and I'm going to include language against that.
Yeah, I think the way I could see that being fun is if a player says, I'm going to cast Wish, and then I bring out a sand timer for 5 minutes, and the whole table has 5 minutes to figure out
and then you've
how that wish is gonna be
gamified
phrased.
the
Right,
wish.
Right.
You've gamified wishing with Wish.
Yeah. So under that circumstance, I think that could be fun. So maybe I'll try that the next time I hand out a Ring of 3 Wishes.
There you go.
Yeah.
A ring of timed wishes.
Yeah, Ring of 3 timed wishes.
Essentially, this wish spell has a utility besides world break.
Yeah, right. So there are essentially three functions of the wish spell. The first function is to replicate any spell of 8th level or lower with a casting time of 1 action, because that's how long it takes to cast Wish, and with no material component costs, right? You just get the effect of the spell by casting Wish. Without getting into specifics, because there's literally like hundreds of specifics we could get into, that's super, super powerful.
That's one of the reasons I had a hard time wrapping my head around Wish.
Yeah.
Is I've got ADD. I have a really hard time assimilating a lot of different pieces of information at the same time.
Yeah.
And thinking of just the scope was mind-boggling to me. Like, you could essentially do anything. Like, what do you mean?
Right.
Like, you can essentially do nothing. Like, it was too much for me to bear.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, I mean, it also facilitates a lot of strange things. It's really complicated to think about because you essentially have to do this podcast to know what all you can do with every spell.
Right.
So, like,
how the different spells work together, or how you can most effectively use each spell.
Right. Or what world-breaking thing you can do with each spell.
I want to awaken a grove of redwood trees to be my personal guard.
So speaking of awaken, I mean, a lot of the time when we're talking about spells, the limiting factor is either the length of time it takes to cast the spell or the material component cost of the spell.
Right.
Since Wish circumvents that, all of a sudden, none of those things are a problem. You can just cast one of those spells that normally take 8 hours or normally have a really expensive, rare component cost. Just once a day, you can just cast it as an action.
That doesn't run the risk of changing the world, so you could be doing that every single day.
Right, yeah, and you don't risk losing your wish, your access to the wish spell. So I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but I did think of 2 examples, one of which is really short and another one's a little bit more involved. Because the wish spell says you cast the spell and it produces a spell of your choice's effects, there are several spells we've done so far that say if you cast the spell X number of times, then it becomes permanent.
Right.
Or whatever. So since an effect of the spell is to make a permanent thing, I think you can cast Wish to shortcut all the repeated casting.
Of course, yeah.
And get that thing. So this does mean that a wizard with Wish can go around just making permanent teleportation circles anywhere they want to go.
Highly sought after.
Yeah, so you've already got, I think by the time you can cast Wish, you're probably beyond, what is anybody going to offer you?
Right. You're high enough level, you've got all the money in the world.
And you can wish for anything you want. So it's like there's just nothing left for anybody to offer you. At that point, it's about shaping the world how you want it to look. Exactly how you see fit. I do like the idea of it just meaning that teleportation circles can be in weird or dangerous places because a 9th level or a 17th level spellcaster could be out there putting these around.
Right.
Then another weird thing that can happen with the wish spell, a way in which it interacts weirdly with other spells, is that Simulacrum is a spell that's normally really limited by the length of time it takes to cast it, and also the fact that it has a material component that's consumed.
What are both of those things?
The spell takes 12 hours to cast.
Oh my god.
And it requires a powdered ruby worth 1,500 gold pieces.
Yeah.
So the ruby is not, 1,500.
No, but time is money, and that's a steep price tag.
So 12 hours is a long time to cast a spell.
Yeah.
However, with Wish, you can cast Simulacrum in 1 action. So that's 6 seconds.
That's 6 seconds.
Right? Okay, so
way less time money.
A Simulacrum is basically a copy of someone, probably you in this circumstance.
Right, and Alex from the podcast a couple of characters brought this up for the clone spell, using Simulacrum. But continue.
So I'm a wizard. I cast Wish, and I choose to make it mimic the effects of Simulacrum. My Simulacrum comes to life, and I command it to cast Wish to make a simulacrum. And that just keeps happening all day long.
All the way down.
And one action is 6 seconds. There are 10 units of that in a minute. And then there are 1,440 minutes in the day.
Oh my God. He's taking out his calculator. Oh no.
End of every day, you'll have 14,400 simulacrums.
Okay. You did this to yourself, because now I need to find out what the population of a particular town is that is of 14,000.
Sure.
Town population 14,000, you said?
14,400.
14,400. Hercules, California. You're making yourself a Hercules, California.
There you go. So
or Moronga as well.
If you've ever been to Hercules, just know that a wizard could do that in a day. That's the important part about Hercules, California.
That's what you need to know about Hercules, California. Hey everybody, Dane here, just wanting to say thank you for all the support you've given us through your downloads, your messages, tweets, and of course sharing the show with others. Word of mouth is the best way for us to grow, along with you rating and reviewing Dispel Magic on whatever podcasting app you use. Benjamin and I would also like to invite you to pledge to our Patreon. You can vote there on future shows, receive weekly show notes, access monthly secret shows, and gain access to our patron-only Discord channel. Thanks again for listening, and as always, happy spelling.
The whole middle section of the spell, the whole second kind of utility of the spell, is that laundry list of things you can do with it. And in terms of that, the only thing on there that really, I think, has an impact in terms of what we usually talk about is that you can make 25,000 gold pieces worth of stuff every day.
The thing that really matters in any world. Money.
Right. Well, if you're you're like Jeff Bezos level of
evil Amazon coming back.
Right. Except for that in this case, you don't even have to run a business. It's just, you just like produce 25,000.
Yeah. You are your own Wish business.
Yeah.
You make a wish.com.
Yeah. So the other thing is that at least when I went intentionally looking for it, there's no spell component cost that's greater than that. So if you don't want to use Wish to cast spells with expensive spell component costs, you can just use Wish kind of proactively so that in the future you have all these really expensive things stockpiled.
Right. And then you don't even need to deal with Wish.
Right. Yeah.
Circumvent.
There's nothing super interesting about the combat piece. One thing that is weird about this spell that I'm not sure is intentional is that it's an instantaneous duration, and one of those secondary, one of those bullet points says give resistance to a damage type.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I were talking earlier, and you kind of blew that off, and I did too. But then I realized that so you could just cast the spell every day for like 2 weeks, and then your party's resistant to all damages forever.
That's true. Yeah.
So you can double the hit points of your friends by just making them resistant to every single damage type.
Oh, it doesn't say that.
No,
it
doesn't have a duration.
You're just always resistant.
So there. One of the bullet points says you could be immune to a single spell or magical effect for eight hours, but this resistance to damage doesn't end. So
I'm thinking of a exploratory team that can just withstand any environment, and they're like the elite group that goes out and expands the world, the known world. I think that's kind of fun. They're the Untouchables.
Yeah, it would be funny because with Wish, even with just these first two things, a wizard who was particularly mercurial could really just make somebody's life utterly bizarre. Like they just hang out in a village casting Wish once a day on a random villager to make that villager functionally immortal.
It's just verbal. I wish. They don't even need to. They don't even need to do any incantation. They don't need to do any hand movements or, It's just, I wish. under your breath to yourself.
Yeah. So the second set of functions is mostly for combat stuff, but then you also have the totally economy destroying 25,000 gold pieces of whatever you want every day.
What have you.
Yeah.
That 300 feet can only be 300 feet.
Right. 300-foot diamond.
300-foot diamond.
Yeah.
I want a diamond house.
The final use of Wish is, obviously the most interesting. It's the one we both agree is probably the reason why people are excited about getting Wish.
Reality bending. Complete the fabric of the world in your very hands for 66% of the time, or else you're done.
Yeah. And this is, I think, where we get to the real, if we're thinking about building a campaign setting or thinking about the role Wish plays in a campaign setting, there's going to be a very limited number of people in the world who can cast Wish, right? And at some point, they must all come to know one another.
If you can cast Wish, you know the others who can cast Wish.
Because it's not just that you would run into them, because you probably wouldn't, but it's that you don't want to spend wishes, this reality-bending wish that you might cause you to lose the spell, on stuff that's going to get unwished by other people, right? So you're going to scout out who all can cast Wish and either try to eliminate them or try to, more likely, I think, because that would be incredibly dangerous. Going after people who can cast Wish is probably not good for your health. More likely, the way I see that situation developing is that there's a informal collective of people who can cast Wish that all either agree ahead of time what they'll allow reality to change, or just agree that they're not going to cast Wish to change reality.
Right. And I can see them, like you brought up earlier, being immune to Wish. They just cast that on themselves every day.
Right.
Like, being a part of this organization, that's required, right? So that they know that if reality is being bent and broken, then they know it's happening.
And it's not going to affect them.
Right.
Can't...
I think that if reality is bent and broken and you don't have that resistance, then it becomes the reality for you. So you don't know that Wish is being cast.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know that for sure. I think part of the wish would have to be, I don't want anybody to remember it being different than this.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. I think for the most part, people do know that a wish has been cast unless you...
Like, suddenly we have 2 moons.
Right. Unless you specifically say, I wish that there was a second moon, and that everybody always...
See, and this
remembers
is where
it always being there.
The nitty-gritty of the wording of the spell would elude me, right? Because I just assumed that everybody would snap into the new reality and be like, this is how it's always been. So they wouldn't necessarily need to do that, but they probably would, right?
Well, because if I just wish everybody in the world, a wish I could make, which might be worth making if I'm part of this group or just learn Wish, is I wish everybody else who knows the spell Wish would die right now. So it would be useful to every day cast a wish unless you're planning on using your wish. It would be useful every day to use your wish to make yourself immune to Wish, unless that's the day you're planning to use Wish to change the world.
I almost want to do a running count of how many times we say the word wish in this episode.
I guess, though, when you make yourself immune to it, you also get to pick up to 10 creatures. So if you could find another wish caster that you trust, that person could make up to 10 of these wish casters immune to Wish. And so that frees you up to have a lot of... Essentially, what I'm getting at is that I think more or less the role this group of wish casters would play in a setting is like an Illuminati type of thing. Like they're attempting to manipulate the history of the world without using the spell Wish, because then that triggers a doomsday scenario where everyone capable of casting Wish is just like, screw it. I'm making the world what I want it until I lose this spell. And it just, this rapid fire, every single caster on the plane who knows Wish is casting Wish to change the world to be what they want, which I have to imagine ends in a pretty destructive situation.
So, like, for example, somebody has brought a comet to hit whatever plane you're on, right? And everyone's seeing this comet in the sky, and anyone who knows Wish is doing different things to prevent that comet from hitting. And all of these things are bumping up against each other, and it's a big old mess. What these people are doing is changing world events so that nobody can call for a comet or the end of the world.
Well, I don't even think it's necessarily that. I think, if I cast wish to make dwarves win this war instead of elves, then all of a sudden all of the elves that can cast wish, or all of the people who wanted the elves to win, can just cast wish to say, well, I wish all dwarves would die. And then you get into this escalating situation
Right.
where what maybe starts as a fairly innocuous wish snowballs out of control because everybody has their response. And then you've got all this unintended collateral damage.
Fallout, yeah.
Yeah, Fallout. So, I mean, I do think that could be a really fun campaign setting to be a post-Wish Storm setting.
Wish Storm.
Where it was like a normal, D&D
Yeah.
fantasy setting. And then, like, the dozen wizards and sorcerers who knew Wish, this got triggered, and they all started blasting their wishes until the world was left like this smoking crater of what it used to be.
Yeah. Twisted beyond recognition.
Yeah.
Oof. But I do like the idea of the dubious morality of changing world events a la an Illuminati, where you could either be a party working for them or trying to find them out or what have you, because they're like, no, we're saving the world. We're not destroying it. We're doing this for the world's sake.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a cool situation because, to me, there's the tension between these are people who could just make the world what they want if they decided gloves off to do it, but they're choosing to do it they're choosing to manipulate history, the course of history, in a harder way, so as not to invite the catastrophic consequences.
I could also see a story point where it's like that has happened. That catastrophe, the Wish Storm,
Yeah.
not just you're living in it, but like it happened, and that's why they created their group, because the Wish Storm happened. This Illuminati group, we should call it something else. What do you want? The Illuminati's too mundane. We everybody knows the Illuminati. You work on that, but This Wish Storm has happened already. They saw the ramifications. That's what prompted this group to come together and right the world. And now have gently been using their wishes, gently, quote unquote, to prevent such a thing from happening again. And that's their motivations for doing it. Because not only do they imagine that it could happen, but some of them lived through it.
Right. And the Wishinati, I think, is what we can call them. The Wishinati.
The Wishinati.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I think when you come up with that core concept, once you've glommed onto the idea that once there are multiple people who can cast a wish in a world, they have to be very careful about how they cast a wish.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the kind of natural outcome of the spell, is that these people have to start knowing each other and talking to each other and coming up with a truce.
I could see it also being a wish committee. Like somebody's like, I bring forth to the Wishinati that I wish to cast wish in this way, and everyone says, what about this? And what about that? I have objections, and then they have to vote on it or something.
So you're thinking there's a wish bureaucracy as well.
I guess,
you're wanting to put red tape.
What I'm trying to do is really procedurally make this.
And there's somebody who's like, we have to wait for an hour to make sure you're not charmed before you cast this wish.
Yeah, probably a skeleton.
Yeah. Right.
A wish skeleton.
Yeah.
That has blue teeth.
I do think that that's a reasonable way that this could shake out, that it would be like that there'd be like proposals of like, I'd like to cast a wish to do this.
It's almost like defending your doctorate or something.
Yeah.
Like you really got to know your stuff. You have to have thought it through, and you have to convince this board.
And that's interesting too, because then you could have like things actually be held up for a long time as they're drafting like the specific language you're going to be allowed to use to cast the wish, because they can't just approve the intent. It can't just be like, yeah, sure, we don't mind if you do that. They'd have to, because they don't want all those unintended consequences too. So they're also there. So
and they don't have a 5-minute timer.
Yeah, so there's a whole committee there crafting the language they're going to allow you to use when you cast a wish.
So as the Modrons are marching across all of reality and stomping out as they do every 1,000 years or whatever it is. Yeah. Like, they're coming closer. You need to approve this language now.
Except you don't, right? Because it doesn't say wish can only affect the present.
So this
committee can just go into a demiplane, hang out while the apocalypse happens, agree to the language they're going to use to avoid the apocalypse, and then jump back and be like, okay, so, and, cast wish to undo the apocalypse.
We've created a society of dungeon masters in game who can just retcon whatever they want. They're just like, never mind. JK. We're changing that. But then there's the chance that you never can cast it again, right?
Right. Yeah. So that is, I think, actually a situation where there might be some politicking around who is made to cast the spell. Yeah, because you might then be kicked out of the Wishinati if you use your wish to reverse the apocalypse and suddenly you can't cast wish anymore. That's a raw deal for you.
Everybody votes on the person they hate the most, who they just personally don't like. Like, make them do it. Make them do it. Maybe they won't be around anymore. Their water cooler chatter is awful.
Yeah.
Get them out of here.
Well,
have you seen the pants they wear? Gross.
It's funny because I feel like we either talk about bureaucrats, the economy, or
secret societies,
or the awful toxic situation that a spell would create, and this kind of does all of that.
Benjamin, what does that say about us?
Let's say about human nature.
Okay.
I think,
right.
Let's ask the real big questions.
The big questions. Human nature. Well, I think that pretty much exhausts what we've got to talk about with Wish.
Yeah. I feel like I'm going to be thinking about the Wishinati and coming up with new ways that organization would function or fail to function for a long time.
An org chart.
Yeah.
A flow chart of maybe the hierarchy of the Wishinati.
Yeah. But now that we're wrapping up our conversation about the Wish, I wanted to say a little bit about the future of Dispel Magic. No.
No?
Dispel Magic isn't going away for good. But we are going to take a little break. We are going to call everything we've released so far Season 1, and we will be back in a little bit with the start of Season 2. We're going to take the time to really hone what we hope will happen in the future for the show, as well as take a well-deserved couple weeks off to care for ourselves.
As the famous song once said, dispels out for summer. But maybe not the whole summer.
Probably not the whole summer.
Okay.
No. So look forward to
definitely not forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're coming back.
Sooner than you'd like.
Sooner than you think. I'd like to expand onto TikTok. I'd like to start working on some things for us to release there. So take a look at our socials for any new offerings we have in those various places. Join us on our Discord. I plan on us doing our weekly live streams of various episodes. So we'll do some repeats, see what people have to say. You can include your thoughts there. Follow us on Discord.
Or on Twitter. At Dispel Magic Pod.
Yeah, that's right. And you can follow Benjamin at
Sterling Vermin or on the internet at sterlingvermin.com.
And you can find me on Twitter at Dane in Danger.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you again after your next long rest.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Dispel Magic. If this has inspired any ideas for your game, or you have another take on today's topic, please let us know on Twitter at Dispel Magic Pod. You can find Benjamin at Sterling Vermin and Dane at Dane in Danger. Thank you to Slim Mittens for our cover art, produced by Benjamin Huffman, produced and edited by Dane Fox McGraw. Oh, can we do that every time where I say long rest with you? No, that would be dumb.
Okay.
Okay.
You already talked yourself out of it, so I don't have to say anything else.
See you soon, Dispellers.